Welcome back. Now, South Africa's business confidence is holding near multi-year highs, with SACCI's business confidence index easing slightly in January but remaining firmly elevated. The gains are largely being driven by stronger financial markets, a firmer rand and higher precious metal prices, even as real economic activity stays subdued. So can improving sentiment translate into real growth and investment? SACCI President Mtho Xulu joins us now to unpack that print. Mtho, thank you so much for your time today. So I've laid the ground there looking at what we saw over the 2025 year, where we averaged at 13-year highs. Yes, a bit of a blip in January, but still quite elevated when it comes to sentiment. Talk to me about how meaningful what we're seeing is.
Good evening, and good evening to the viewers. Thank you very much for having us. Look, it's meaningful in the sense that it gives you a longer picture of exactly what the South African economy is now experiencing. You know, to be on an all-time high for such a long time is actually very symbolic, because it just shows that this economy is a resilient economy, and when the seasonality and decision-making are coupled together, we can get some improvement. So the symbolic high is encouraging, because we can build on it, but also in the year-on-year, we also see a high note. So it is showing that when various factors come together, domestic decision-making, good financial climate, commodity prices, and a bit of luck in terms of geopolitics, the South African economy can actually survive.
Yeah, talking about some of those factors you highlighted there, the precious metal prices, good showing from the JSE, etc., etc. I'm wondering how sustainable these drivers are, especially when looking at something like the rand that's not necessarily driven by us, but rather the weaker dollar, as well as that precious metal boom we are seeing, which is quite cyclical as well.
Yes, no, look, so this is just, as I say, I also put in the word luck.
Yes.
You know, there was a time when there was a coal price boom, for instance, and there was big returns for the receiver, I think just so shortly after COVID. And also, obviously, the currency is doing better now, gold is doing well. No one would have predicted all this.
Yeah,
so the trick is that we must always have an economy ready to take advantage of these seasonal highs, because when it goes low, it really goes low. And I think we point out in our paper that the confidence is not driven largely by economic activity.
Yes.
It's driven by other factors. So yes, the good track that we have now must be coupled by proper economic activity, so that we can take advantage of the profits.
And this is, of course, seen through the passivity of real economic sub-indices that is flagged as a concern in the print as well. I want to talk to you about how do we then translate this sentiment we are seeing to real activity, right? When you talk to the man on the ground, they keep talking about, oh yes, the rand is strong. Oh yes, we are seeing, gold prices high. We are seeing the JSE performing well. But this is not being translated when you look at things like jobs, when you look like economic growth. How do we then go about closing the gap?
I think we obviously, it's always about the climate and the environment.
Yes.
And I think you want to get to a point where, if the private sector, for instance, has made the returns that they've gotten now with a decent currency, the mining industry that has benefited, for instance, we need to encourage them to invest in new mines and create new jobs in the country, and be able to create other industries within the country. So it should not only about collecting the profits that come from the highs. We also need to be able to say, okay, how do we translate it that even if it's not gold, but what other commodities can these monies be shifted into? And obviously, how do we also insist that if you're going to be benefiting from a good interest rates, you can put that money into manufacturing in the country. There's also been a turn in terms of some logistics and the energy. How do we convert those reforms into domestic investment? So I think now that we're in this place and we think there's an alignment between the two sectors, we need to be able to say, How do you create a patriotic economy that can take advantage of the profits and build long-term economic sustainability so that we don't leave South Africans behind?
You talk about rallying private sector capital, and I'm keen to find out from you whether the environment is enticing enough for the private sector, right? You touched on those structural reforms, what we're seeing playing out at Eskom, what we're seeing playing out and Transnet, and I'm wondering if we are moving fast enough. I mean, just last week or a few weeks ago on energy, business had been concerned about, Eskom keeping those transmission assets, but of course, President Ramaphosa did clear that up at SONA.
Yes, well, look, it's as good as it can get. I think we don't want to get to a point where we are perpetually looking for a perfect state of affairs.
Fair.
I think the fact that we have an opportunity where South African companies have benefited from good share prices, good commodity prices, lower inflation, tourism numbers. Eventually we must start responding to some of those good traits. Some of the reforms that have been committed also actually involve private sector getting involved.
Yes.
So we must never actually try and get to a perfect state. It's always going to be a work in progress, but you must appreciate that a lot of work has been done in the reforms, and obviously we must just keep going and maintain the positivity.
Yeah, and surely that will then translate into real economic growth. Mtho, thank you so much for your time and taking us through that business confidence print out earlier today. That was Mtho Xulu, President of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry.